Imagine being the son of the greatest warrior on Earth, but almost nobody remembers you. You have the blood of a Saiyan. You can become a Super Saiyan. You can even do something that took your father years to accomplish. And yet, you are still forgotten. This is the story of Goten, Goku's second son, and perhaps the most overlooked character in Dragon Ball Z. When Goten was born, his father wasn't there. Goku had died during the Cell Games, so unlike Gohan, Goten never got the chance to grow up with his father. He didn't know Goku as the legendary warrior everyone else talked about. He knew him as a picture, a memory, a father he had never actually met. And yet, Goten somehow grew up remarkably happy. That's what makes his story so interesting. Goten wasn't raised like Gohan. Gohan grew up under pressure. He was trained because the world needed him. He was constantly told about his incredible potential. Goten had almost none of that pressure. He simply grew up being a kid. He played, he laughed, he spent time with his mother, and he trained with his older brother. For once, a Saiyan child wasn't being raised for war. He was just being allowed to be a child. Then something incredible happened. Goten became a Super Saiyan, and he did it at an age when Goku himself hadn't even come close. No near-death experience, no traumatic transformation, no desperate battle. He simply transformed. For Goten, becoming a Super Saiyan was almost natural, and that tells us something important. The generation after Goku had inherited everything he had fought so hard to achieve. Goten didn't have to struggle for the power. He was born into its legacy. But there's a strange sadness hidden inside that achievement, because Goten never understood just how extraordinary he was. To him, being a Super Saiyan was almost normal. He didn't know what it meant to Goku. He didn't understand the years of training, the pain, the battles, the sacrifices. He simply had the power, and that became both his gift and his problem. Then Goku finally returned to Earth. For the first time, Goten met his father, and the scene is almost strangely casual. Goku sees his son, Goten sees his father, and there isn't some huge dramatic reunion. No years of tears, no long conversation about everything they missed, because Goten doesn't really know what he's been missing. He had already grown up without Goku. He adapted. And that's one of the saddest parts of his character. Goten doesn't resent his father, because he never had enough time with him to know what he lost. Then comes Goten's relationship with Trunks. The two boys couldn't be more different. Trunks grew up as the son of Vegeta. Goten grew up as the son of Goku. One had a father obsessed with strength. The other barely knew his father existed. Yet, they became best friends. And together, they became one of Dragon Ball's most entertaining duos. They were reckless, competitive, immature, but they were also incredibly powerful. And eventually, they discovered fusion, Gotenks, two children becoming one warrior. And suddenly, Goten and Trunks had enough power to challenge enemies far beyond their age. But there was a problem. They were still children. They had the power of warriors, but not the maturity. They treated battles like games. They joked, they showed off, they wasted time. And eventually, that became one of their greatest weaknesses, because having power doesn't automatically mean knowing how to use it. That's the real difference between Goten and Gohan. Gohan understood the responsibility of power. Goten never had to. Gohan grew up in a world where he had to become a warrior. Goten grew up in the peaceful world that Gohan helped create. And ironically, that's why Goten became possible. His carefree childhood was proof that the older generation had succeeded. Goku fought so his children wouldn't have to. Gohan suffered so Goten could grow up laughing. But there's another tragedy. Goten had incredible potential, and then the story slowly moved on without him. The boy who became a Super Saiyan as a child eventually became a background character. The son of Goku was forgotten. His power stopped being important, his dreams became unclear, and his role became mostly comic relief. Imagine having the potential to become one of the strongest warriors alive and growing up in a world where nobody really needs you to be one. But maybe that's the point. Goten doesn't represent failure. He represents peace. Goku's generation had to fight for survival. Gohan's generation had to inherit that responsibility. But Goten was finally allowed to live. He didn't have to save the planet. He didn't have to defeat Cell. He didn't have to fight Frieza. He didn't have to become the next Goku. He could simply be Goten. And maybe that's why his story is more meaningful than fans realize. Goten is proof that the sacrifices of the previous generation actually mattered. Goku spent his entire life fighting stronger enemies. Vegeta sacrificed his pride. Gohan endured battles no child should have experienced. And because of all of that, Goten got something they rarely had: a childhood. That's why calling Goten the forgotten son of Goku is only half the story. Yes, Dragon Ball forgot to give him the spotlight, but inside the story itself, Goten represents something beautiful. He represents the world Goku always wanted to protect, a world where children don't have to become warriors, a world where being strong is optional, a world where a Saiyan can grow up and simply enjoy being alive. Goten may never become the strongest. He may never surpass Goku. He may never receive the same legendary moments as Gohan or Vegeta, but maybe that's okay, because Goten was never meant to carry the world. He was meant to inherit a world that had already been saved. And perhaps that's the greatest legacy Goku could have ever given his son. Not power, not fame, not a legendary transformation, but the freedom to simply be a kid. And that's why Goten may be one of the most overlooked but quietly meaningful characters in Dragon Ball Z.